My wife cheated with my brother, said be his best man and demanded family saving, so now I crashed their engagement and let karma collect everything. I, a 30-year-old male, never thought I'd be typing this out, but here we are. Sorry in advance for the wall of text, but I need to get this off my chest. Maybe hearing from other people who've been through similar hell will help, or maybe this will help someone else who knows. This nightmare started 3 years ago when I was still married to Sarah. We'd been together since sophomore year of college, nearly 12 years total, before everything imploded. I always thought we had something solid. We survived the post-college broke phase, my medical school debt, her career changes, and even a miscarriage that nearly broke us. But apparently, we couldn't survive my own damn brother. To understand this clusterfuck, I need to explain my family dynamic. I'm the oldest, with a younger brother, Jake, a 33-year-old male. Since we were kids, Jake was the golden child who could do no wrong. My parents, especially my dad, treated him like he was God's gift to humanity. I was the responsible one who worked my ass off for every scrap of recognition, while Jake coasted through life on charm and my parents' checkbook. For example, when I graduated medical school and landed a residency at a prestigious hospital, after working 80-hour weeks and drowning in $280,000 of student loans, my parents sent a generic congratulatory text. When Jake finally finished his business degree after 6 years of partying and C averages, they threw him a massive graduation party and bought him a fucking BMW, a brand new BMW for graduating with a 2.4 GPA. This was the pattern my entire life. When I bought my first house entirely with my own money, my parents came over, criticized the neighborhood, and asked why I didn't get something nicer. 2 months later, they co-signed for Jake's condo in the trendy part of town and paid his down payment. Despite all this, I tried to maintain a relationship with Jake. He's my brother, and I stupidly thought blood meant something. Maybe that's why I was blind to what was happening right under my nose. I remember one Thanksgiving, I'd just finished a 36-hour shift at the hospital and was exhausted. Jake showed up 2 hours late to dinner with some lame excuse about traffic. Instead of calling him out, my mom kept his food warm and fussed over him when he arrived. Meanwhile, she'd criticized me earlier for looking unprofessional because I hadn't had time to shave that morning after saving 3 lives in the emergency room. The favoritism was so obvious that even extended family noticed. My cousin Maria once pulled me aside at a family reunion and said, "It's like you're invisible when Jake's in the room." She wasn't wrong. At my grandfather's funeral, my eulogy, I was the only grandchild who'd gone into medicine like him, was cut short because we're running behind schedule. But they gave Jake 10 minutes to ramble about 2 fishing trips he'd taken with Grandpa. When I met Sarah in college, I felt like I finally had something that was completely mine. She was smart as hell, ambitious, and had this infectious laugh that could light up a room. We clicked immediately. She was getting her degree in marketing and I was pre-medical. We were both driven and understood the late nights of studying. By senior year, we were living together in a crappy apartment off campus, splitting ramen and dreaming about our future. I remember our first apartment had this terrible leak in the bathroom ceiling. We couldn't afford to move, so we created this elaborate system of plastic sheeting and buckets that we had to empty multiple times a day. Instead of complaining, Sarah turned it into a game. Whoever emptied the most buckets in a week got to pick the movie for date night. That's the kind of person she was, or at least the kind of person I thought she was. My parents weren't thrilled when I brought Sarah home the first time. She came from a working-class family. Her dad was a plumber, her mom a school secretary, and my mom especially made these little comments about her clothes or her accent. Sarah grew up in rural Pennsylvania. Looking back, I think they always expected me to marry someone from our social circle, otherwise known as someone with money and connections. Classic elitist bullshit. We got married when I was 28 and Sarah was 26, after I'd finished medical school and was starting my residency. We had a modest wedding because we were paying for it ourselves. My parents contributed exactly $500, which my mom made sure to mention in her wedding speech. We would have loved to do more, but we're saving for Jake's future. Meanwhile, they'd already told us they were setting aside $75,000 for Jake's future wedding, even though he was single and hooking up with a different girl every weekend. At our wedding reception, my dad gave a toast that spent more time talking about Jake's recent job offer than about Sarah and me. And while we're celebrating Rob finding his match, we're also proud to announce Jake has been accepted at Merrill Lynch with a starting bonus that's quite impressive for someone his age. Sarah squeezed my hand under the table, and I remember thinking how lucky I was to have someone who understood what I dealt with. For the first 5 years of our marriage, things were good despite the challenges. I was working crazy hours as a resident, and then as a new attending physician in emergency medicine. Sarah had built a solid career in digital marketing, working her way up to management. We finally bought our house, a modest 4-bedroom in a nice neighborhood with good schools. We were talking about trying for a baby again after the heartbreak of our miscarriage 2 years earlier. We had routines that kept us connected despite my chaotic schedule. Sunday mornings were sacred, no matter what. We'd make breakfast together and go for a walk in the park near our house. We had a standing date night every other Wednesday. When I worked night shifts, she'd leave me little notes in my lunch container with jokes or encouragement. I thought we were solid, unbreakable. That's when Jake started showing up a lot. At first, it seemed innocent. Jake's new apartment was coincidentally only 15 minutes from our house, even though it was 40 minutes from his job. He started dropping by unannounced, always when I was working night shifts at the hospital. He'd bring dinner for Sarah or offer to help with stuff around the house. I actually thanked him for checking in on Sarah when I was working those 24-hour shifts. What a fucking idiot I was. Looking back, there were so many red flags. Sarah started dressing differently, wearing more makeup, even on weekends. She was constantly on her phone and would take calls in the other room. She set up a password on her phone for the first time in our relationship, claiming it was for work security. Our sex life, which had always been great, became almost non-existent. She was tired, or had a headache, or was stressed about work. I noticed she'd started buying new underwear, nothing outrageous, but different from her usual style. When I commented on it, she said her friend Lisa had recommended a new brand that was more comfortable. I believed her. She stopped sharing details about her day. Before, she'd tell me about work drama or something funny that happened at lunch. Now, when I asked about her day, she'd just say fine or busy and change the subject. When I asked if everything was okay, she'd get defensive and say I was overthinking things. I chalked it up to both of us being busy and stressed. I was working 60-plus hours a week at the hospital, and she had just taken on bigger responsibilities at her company. Plus, we were actively trying to get pregnant again, which added its own pressure. I never suspected Jake. Never. He was my brother, for fuck's sake. The way I found out wasn't some dramatic confrontation or catching them in bed. It was stupid, ordinary, and devastating all at once. It was our anniversary, and I had switched shifts with a colleague so I could surprise Sarah. I left work early, bought her favorite flowers, sunflowers, and champagne, and headed home around 2 p.m. when she thought I'd be at the hospital until midnight. When I pulled onto our street, I noticed Jake's BMW in our driveway. I thought nothing of it at first. Maybe he was dropping something off. But then I realized Sarah's car was in the garage, meaning she had called in sick to work or was working from home. Still, my idiot brain didn't connect the dots. I thought maybe she wasn't feeling well and Jake brought her soup or something. I was even going to thank him for being so thoughtful. I entered through the garage using my code, wanting to surprise Sarah. The house was quiet, but I heard faint music coming from upstairs. I went up slowly, flowers and champagne still in hand, thinking I'd surprise her in her home office. The bedroom door was partially open, and there they were. I didn't walk in on them having sex. Somehow what I saw was worse. They were lying in our bed, the bed I'd paid for, in the house I mostly paid for. Jake was in his boxers, with his arm around Sarah, who was wearing just a t-shirt, my fucking t-shirt from medical school. They were drinking wine and laughing at something on her phone, looking so comfortable, so intimate, like a real couple. I stood there for what felt like forever, just watching them through the crack in the door. They hadn't noticed me. They looked happy, genuinely happy, in a way Sarah and I hadn't been in months. That's what gutted me most in that moment. Finally, I pushed the door open. The look on their faces, shock, guilt, and then this flash of annoyance at being caught, I'll never forget it. Sarah scrambled to cover herself, while Jake just sat there, not even trying to move. "How long?" was all I could say. Sarah started crying, but Jake actually smirked. Smirked at me in my house in my bed with my wife. "Come on, bro," he said, like we were discussing a baseball game or something trivial. "These things happen." I don't remember dropping the champagne bottle, but I remember it shattering on our hardwood floor. The flowers fell next. Sarah was saying something, crying, but all I could focus on was Jake's smug face. "Rob, please, let me explain," Sarah was saying. "It's not what you think." "Not what I think?" I finally found my voice. "You're half naked in bed with my brother on our anniversary, and it's not what I think?" What followed was a blur of shouting, crying, and pathetic excuses. Apparently, they'd been sleeping together for almost 7 months. 7 months! Almost the entire time Jake had been stopping by to help. "We didn't mean for it to happen," Sarah kept saying. It just did. Jake finally got out of bed and had the audacity to try to put his hand on my shoulder. Look, man, we were going to tell you. We just couldn't find the right time. I shoved his hand away and told them both to get the fuck out of my house. Sarah begged to talk about it rationally, but I was done. I threw Jake's clothes out into the hallway and told him if he wasn't out of my house in 2 minutes, I'd break every bone in his body. He actually looked scared then, probably the first genuine emotion he'd shown. As they scrambled to get dressed and leave, I went downstairs, grabbed a trash bag, and started throwing Sarah's things into it. By the time they came downstairs, I had 3 bags filled with her clothes and was working on a 4th. Rob, please, Sarah was sobbing. Let's just talk. I made a terrible mistake. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary or burning dinner, I said, continuing to stuff her designer clothes into garbage bags. Fucking my brother for 7 months is a choice, a series of choices made every single day. They left with garbage bags full of her stuff, and I changed the locks that same day. The worst part, as I was cleaning up the broken glass from the champagne bottle, I found an anniversary card Sarah had bought for me, hidden in her nightstand drawer. It had some generic message about love standing the test of time, and she'd signed it "Forever yours, Sarah." The fucking audacity. She was planning to give me an anniversary card and then go back to sleeping with my brother the next day. I thought my family would be outraged on my behalf. Shows how delusional I was. The day after I caught them, I got a call from my mother. I was still in shock, hadn't slept, and was debating between trashing all our wedding photos or setting fire to the bedroom furniture. I answered, thinking maybe, just maybe, my mom would offer support. Instead, she started with, "Jacob is very upset, not, 'How are you doing, Rob?' or 'I'm so sorry this happened.' No, her first concern was that precious Jake was upset." "Jake is upset?" I laughed, a hollow sound that scared even me. "My wife was fucking my brother." There was a pause, and then my mother said something I'll never forgive her for. "Well, perhaps if you'd been home more, instead of always working, Sarah wouldn't have been lonely." That's right, she blamed me for my wife's affair with her son. "And you know," she continued, "Jake and Sarah have a lot in common. They're both so creative and social. You've always been so intense. Maybe this is for the best." I hung up and threw my phone against the wall so hard it shattered. Then I sat on my kitchen floor and cried for the first time since I was a teenager. My dad called the next day on my landline. Yes, I still had one. His approach was slightly different, but equally infuriating. "This family drama is bad for business," he said. "My father, the successful real estate developer, always concerned with appearances. We need to solve this quietly. Jake feels terrible about how you found out, but what's done is done." "How I found out?" I repeated. "The problem isn't how I found out. The problem is that my brother was fucking my wife." My dad sighed like I was being a difficult child. "Robert, these things happen in families. The important thing now is to handle this with dignity. No one needs to know the details. We'll say you and Sarah grew apart, and eventually, after a respectful amount of time, she and Jake found comfort in each other." I laughed again, that same scary laugh. "You want to rewrite history to protect Jake's reputation? Typical. I'm trying to protect all our reputations," my father said sternly, "including yours." "I don't give a fuck about my reputation," I told him. "And as far as I'm concerned, I don't have a brother anymore, or parents for that matter." I hung up on him too. The next few weeks were a haze of rage and paperwork. I filed for divorce immediately, citing adultery and naming Jake specifically. I knew this would make the divorce public record, potentially embarrassing my status-conscious family. Sarah tried to contact me multiple times, leaving tearful voicemails, begging for a chance to explain, as if there was any explanation that could justify what she'd done. I blocked her number. Jake tried once to come to my house, but I met him at the door with a baseball bat and a promise that if he stepped 1 foot on my property, I'd make sure he'd be drinking through a straw for the next 6 months. He backed off quickly. My colleagues at the hospital noticed something was wrong, but I deflected their concerns. I threw myself into work, picking up extra shifts to stay busy and away from my empty house. On my rare days off, I started boxing at a local gym, taking out my rage on punching bags instead of my brother's face. Then came the email from my mother that pushed me over the edge. The subject line simply read, "The engagement." The email was short and to the point. "Robert, Jacob, and Sarah have decided to make their relationship official. They've become engaged and plan to marry in June at the country club your father and I are hosting. We know this is difficult, but Jake has asked that you be his best man. He says despite everything, you're still his brother, and he wants you by his side on his special day. This could be a good opportunity for healing. Family should stick together no matter what. Please call me when you're ready to discuss." Mom. I read it 3 times, convinced it was some kind of sick joke. They'd been officially together for 6 weeks, and they were already engaged? And Jake wanted me as his best man? I might have laughed if I wasn't so damn angry. The sheer entitlement, the complete lack of awareness, it was staggering. I printed out the email and taped it to my fridge as a reminder of exactly who my family really was. I didn't respond to the email. Instead, I went to the gym and hit the punching bag until my knuckles bled. The next day, I received a text from Jake, got the time off for the engagement party next month. Hope you'll be there. We need to bury the hatchet, bro. That's when I decided the high road wasn't working for me anymore. These people, my so-called family and my cheating ex, weren't just moving on with their lives. They were actively trying to pull me into their narrative, to normalize what they'd done as if it was just some minor disagreement. I finally responded to my mother's email. Let me be crystal clear. I will not be attending any engagement party, wedding, or family function where Jake and Sarah are present. Jake is no longer my brother, and you are no longer my parents. If you support this sham of a relationship, go ahead with your wedding plans. But know that if you do this, you are choosing Jake over me for the last time. My mother's response came within minutes. You're being childish and selfish, she wrote. This isn't just about you. Jake and Sarah are in love, and Sarah is pregnant. You need to grow up and accept that life doesn't always go as planned. Pregnant. The word hit me like a truck. Sarah was pregnant with my brother's child, Sarah, who had cried in my arms after our miscarriage, promising we'd try again when the time was right. The time was apparently right, just not with me. I remember sitting at my kitchen table, staring at that email for what felt like hours. Then something inside me just snapped, not in a violent way, but in a moment of perfect clarity. These people weren't worth my pain. They weren't worth my rage. They certainly weren't worth my forgiveness. That night I made a decision. I was done being the bigger person. I was done turning the other cheek. It was time to show my family and Sarah exactly what they'd thrown away. I also decided that day to reach out to a therapist. I was clearly struggling to process everything, and while revenge might feel good in the moment, I needed to make sure I wasn't destroying myself in the process. It was one of the best decisions I've ever made. The therapist helped me see that what I was feeling was normal. The betrayal, the rage, the grief. All of it was a natural response to trauma. She also helped me channel those feelings into more productive outlets than just fantasizing about ruining Jake's life, though I still did plenty of that. I spent the next few months transforming myself and my life. I hired the most ruthless divorce attorney in the city, a woman known for leaving cheating spouses financially devastated. I made sure Sarah knew exactly who was representing me. At work, I accepted a promotion to Chief of Emergency Medicine that I'd previously been hesitant about because it would mean even more hours away from home. Now that didn't matter anymore. The significant salary bump would be useful for what I had planned. I sold the house, my house, that I'd paid 90% of the down payment for. Sarah tried to fight for her fair share in the divorce, but my lawyer had a field day with the evidence of her adultery. In the end, Sarah walked away with far less than she'd hoped. I bought a sleek penthouse downtown with floor-to-ceiling windows and views of the city. I hired a personal trainer and started working out 6 days a week, channeling my anger into transforming my body. I traded in my sensible sedan for a Porsche 911, something I'd always wanted but had deemed too impractical when I was married. I also started dating. Nothing serious, just dinner with attractive, successful women. I made sure these dates happened at visible restaurants where mutual friends might spot us, and I was always the perfect gentleman. Charming, attentive, generous. The word got back to Sarah, as I knew it would. One of her friends, Megan, actually reached out to me on Facebook. You look great, Rob. Sarah mentions you sometimes. I think she regrets what happened. I didn't respond, but I made sure to post a photo the next day of me and my date at a concert Sarah and I had planned to attend before everything fell apart. All the while, I was quietly making other moves. I hired a private investigator to look into Jake's business dealings. My brother had recently started his own investment firm, heavily funded by my parents. The private investigator discovered that Jake was cutting corners, making questionable investments, and possibly misrepresenting returns to clients. I also discovered through hospital connections that my dad had been diagnosed with stage 2 prostate cancer but was keeping it quiet. He'd been advised to have surgery but was delaying treatment, likely not wanting to appear weak during Jake and Sarah's engagement festivities. Most importantly, I found out through the hospital grapevine that Sarah had lost the baby. She'd had a miscarriage at 10 weeks. I felt a moment of sympathy for her. I knew firsthand how devastating that could be. But then I remembered how she'd betrayed me, and that sympathy hardened into resolve. 2 weeks before the lavish engagement party my parents had planned at the country club, I received a call from Sarah. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity got the better of me. "Rob?" Her voice was small, hesitant. "Please don't hang up. What do you want?" I kept my voice neutral. I lost the baby," she started crying. "And Jake, he's been different since it happened. Distant. I don't know if he ever really wanted a child or if he was just excited about having something that was his and not yours." I said nothing. "Your mom has been awful about it," she continued. "She suggested that I failed somehow, that maybe I wasn't taking care of myself properly, as if I wanted this to happen. Still, I remained silent. "I know you hate me," she said finally, "and you have every right to. But I miss you. I miss what we had. I made the biggest mistake of my life, and I know now what I threw away." "Is that all?" I asked coldly. "No," she whispered. "Jake's firm is in trouble. Some clients are threatening to pull out, and your dad is sick but refusing treatment. Everything's falling apart, and I don't know what to do anymore." I waited a beat, then said, "Sounds like you made your bed, Sarah. Now you get to lie in it with my brother." I hung up, my heart pounding. The pieces were falling into place faster than I'd anticipated. It was time to accelerate my plan. The night of the engagement party arrived, a black tie affair at the country club, with over 200 guests invited. My parents had spared no expense for their precious Jake and his bride-to-be, despite my father's health issues and Jake's business problems. I wasn't invited, of course, but that didn't mean I couldn't make an appearance. I'd been careful in the preceding weeks. I'd accidentally run into several family friends, expressing my sadness about the upcoming wedding, but insisting I wish them well. Family is family, after all, I'd say with a sad smile. People ate it up, poor Rob, so mature, despite his brother stealing his wife. The night of the party, I dressed in my best suit, tailored navy with a crisp white shirt and gold cufflinks that had once belonged to my grandfather. I looked good, better than good. The months of working out and living well had transformed me. I arrived at the country club just as dinner was being served. The maitre d' recognized me. I'd slipped him $500 earlier that week to ensure I wouldn't be stopped. He nodded as I walked past, pretending not to see me. The ballroom was decorated lavishly, white roses everywhere, crystal chandeliers, champagne flowing. I stood at the entrance for a moment, surveying the scene. My parents were at the head table with Jake and Sarah. My father looked thin, his face gaunt despite his forced smile. My mother was animated, playing the perfect hostess. Jake looked stressed, constantly checking his phone. And Sarah? Sarah looked miserable in her designer dress, forcing smiles for photos. I walked in confidently, and it took a few seconds for people to notice me. Then the whispers started, heads turning, conversations stopping mid-sentence. I smiled pleasantly and made my way to the bar, ordering a sparkling water. My mother saw me first, her face went white. She nudged my father, who looked up and froze. Jake was deep in conversation with someone who looked like a potential investor and didn't notice immediately. Sarah was the last to see me, and when she did, something flickered across her face. Relief, hope, panic, all three. I took my drink and walked directly to their table, coming to stand right in front of them. The entire room was watching now, a collective held breath. "Robert," my mother hissed, "what are you doing here?" I smiled warmly. "I'm celebrating my brother's engagement, of course. Isn't that what family does?" Jake finally noticed me and stood up abruptly. "Rob, what the hell, man? Sit down." "Jake," I said, still smiling. "I'm not here to cause a scene. Just thought I'd offer my congratulations in person." Sarah looked up at me, her eyes wide. "Rob." I nodded at her. "Sarah, you look lovely. Marriage clearly agrees with you. Oh wait, you're not married. Yeah, just engaged to my brother after cheating on me with him for months. My mistake." My father stood up then, swaying slightly. He looked ill. "Robert, this is neither the time nor the place." "I disagree," I said pleasantly. "This is exactly the time and place. All your friends are here, all your business associates, everyone who matters to this family, right? So they should all know the truth." I turned to address the room, raising my glass. A toast to the happy couple. To my brother Jake, who fucked my wife behind my back for 7 months before I caught them in my bed. And to Sarah, my cheating ex-wife, who's apparently worked her way up in the family. I hope you'll all join me in congratulating them on finding true love through betrayal and deceit. The room went silent. You could have heard a pin drop. "Oh, and while we're sharing news," I continued cheerfully, "a few other items you might find interesting. My father has cancer but is refusing treatment because appearances matter more than his health. My brother's investment firm is under investigation for fraud. Those promised returns aren't quite what they seem. And the baby they were expecting? Gone. Just like my respect for everyone at this table. Jake lunged at me then, but he was too slow. I sidestepped easily, and he stumbled, knocking over champagne glasses. "You bastard," he snarled. "You're trying to ruin everything because you're jealous." I laughed, genuinely amused. Jealous of what? Your failing business? Your relationship built on betrayal? No, Jake, I'm not jealous. I'm free. I turned to leave, but Sarah grabbed my arm. "Rob, please," she whispered urgently. "We need to talk. Things aren't... Jake isn't who I thought he was. He's changed." I looked down at her hand on my arm, then back at her face. "That's the thing about cheaters and liars, Sarah. They don't just cheat and lie once, it becomes who they are." I gently removed her hand and walked away. Behind me, I could hear my mother's frantic attempts to salvage the situation. My father's labored breathing, Jake's angry denials about his business. But I didn't look back. Outside, the night air was cool and fresh. I handed my ticket to the valet and waited for my Porsche. As I did, guests began streaming out of the ballroom, some looking shocked, others whispering excitedly. Several of my parents' oldest friends nodded at me respectfully as they passed. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. "Please call me. I made a terrible mistake. I want to fix things." Then another from Jake. "You're going to regret this, bro. I swear to God." And finally, one from my mother. "Your father collapsed. We're taking him to the hospital. Is this what you wanted?" I deleted all three without responding. The next morning, I received a flurry of calls. My father had indeed been taken to the hospital, my hospital. As chief of emergency medicine, I'd been notified immediately but had delegated his care to another physician. He was stable but would need the surgery he'd been postponing. Jake's business partners were pulling out left and right, and the SEC was now openly investigating his firm. Sarah had moved out of his apartment, unable to handle the fallout. Over the next few weeks, the begging started. Jake called daily, leaving increasingly desperate voicemails about how sorry he was, how he'd always been jealous of me, how he needed my help with his legal troubles. My mother emailed constantly, switching between guilt trips about my father and pleas for family unity. The most persistent was Sarah. She showed up at my hospital, my gym, even my new penthouse, always with tears and apologies and declarations that she'd made the worst mistake of her life. She'd cut off her long hair, the hair I'd always loved, into a short bob that made her look older and more severe. Her designer clothes had been replaced with simpler outfits. She was trying to be the Sarah I'd fallen in love with in college, but that woman no longer existed for me. One day she cornered me in the hospital parking garage. "Rob, please, just 5 minutes. I've been trying to reach you for weeks. I have nothing to say to you," I told her, walking toward my car. "Jake was a mistake," she said, following me. "A horrible mistake. He never loved me. He just wanted what you had. As soon as you were out of the picture, he changed. He started staying out late, flirting with other women in front of me. When I lost the baby, he was relieved. He said maybe it was for the best." I stopped and turned to her. "And this surprises you? You thought the man who would sleep with his brother's wife behind his back for months would somehow be loyal to you?" She flinched. "I deserve that, I know I do. But Rob, what we had was real. We can fix this. I know we can." I laughed. "There's nothing to fix, Sarah. You destroyed everything, and the worst part? I'm glad you did. Because now I see who you really are, who my family really is, and I'm better off without all of you." "You don't mean that," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I know you don't. I've never meant anything more," I said, getting into my car. "Don't contact me again." After weeks of their collective harassment, I finally agreed to meet all three of them at a neutral location, a private room at an upscale restaurant downtown. They arrived together, Jake looking haggard in a rumpled suit, my mother thin and anxious, Sarah hovering uncertainly at the edge of the group. "Thank you for coming," my mother began. "We know you're angry, but we're family. We can work through this." I smiled. "I'm not angry anymore. I'm indifferent. There's a difference." Jake leaned forward. "Look, Rob, I fucked up. I know that, but I'm drowning here. The SEC is crawling up my ass, investors are suing, and my reputation is shot. I need your help."
"My help?" I raised an eyebrow. "What could I possibly do for you?"
"Your friend from college, Tim Matthews. He's with the SEC now. You could talk to him, tell him I made mistakes, but I'm not a criminal." I laughed. "But you are a criminal, Jake. Your firm was running a glorified Ponzi scheme. Tim showed me the evidence himself." Jake's face fell. You talked to him already? Of course I did, I'm thorough. My mother clutched her pearls. Robert, please. Your father's health is deteriorating. The stress of all this is killing him. The cancer is killing him, I corrected her. The cancer he could have treated months ago if appearances weren't so important to him. Sarah hadn't spoken yet. She sat, staring at her hands. What do you want, Sarah? I asked, making her jump. Why are you even here? She looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. I want another chance. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm asking anyway. These past months have shown me what a horrible mistake I made. You mean the mistake of cheating on me with my brother, or the mistake of getting caught, or maybe the mistake of discovering that Jake isn't the perfect golden boy after all? She flinched. All of it. I was flattered by Jake's attention. You were working so much, and he was always there telling me how beautiful I was, how I deserved more attention. Classic predator moves, I nodded. And you fell for it? Yes, she whispered. I did, and I've lost everything because of it. I looked at the three of them, my brother, my mother, my ex-wife, all looking at me with desperation, hoping I'd bail them out, make their problems disappear, just like I'd always done. Here's what I'm going to do, I said finally. Nothing. I'm going to continue living my life, my very good, very successful life, without any of you in it. Jake, you're going to face the consequences of your actions, legal and otherwise. Mom, you're going to take care of Dad and finally confront the reality that your favorite son is a fraud. And Sarah, I looked directly at her, you're going to move on. Just not with me. Please, Jake begged, his voice breaking. At least help with Dad. The treatments are expensive, and with my assets frozen, I've already taken care of Dad's medical expenses, I interrupted. But not because of you or Mom, because despite everything, he's still my father. The bills will be paid, and he'll get the best care. But that doesn't mean I want him or any of you in my life. My mother started crying. Robert, please, we're sorry, we're all so sorry. I know you are, I said, standing up. But here's the thing about sorry. It only counts when you say it because you genuinely regret your actions, not because those actions came with consequences you didn't anticipate. I dropped several $100 bills on the table to cover a meal none of us had eaten. Don't contact me again, any of you. I've instructed my lawyer, my building security, and my hospital staff accordingly. This is the last time we'll speak. As I walked out, Sarah called after me, Rob, you can't just leave us like this, please. I turned back one last time, I'm not leaving you. You left me first, I'm just finally accepting it. Outside, my new girlfriend was waiting in my Porsche. A brilliant neurosurgeon who'd never dream of sleeping with my non-existent brother. She smiled as I slid into the driver's seat. How did it go? She asked, squeezing my hand. It's over, I said, feeling lighter than I had in years. Finally, completely over. As we drove away, I caught a glimpse of the three of them in my rearview mirror, standing forlornly on the sidewalk. Then the light changed and I accelerated forward, leaving them behind for good.